Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. These inspiring words are often attributed to Margaret Mead, an American anthropologist. I probably should have started by telling a story of how I got an interest in human rights. Now, I'm not going to do that for one reason. There is no such story. It is hard, though, to be careless about the human rights violations which we can read about in the news almost every day. And of course, human rights violations are not only something which happens in countries far away. Take human trafficking for sexual exploitation, the modern form of slavery. It also happens in the US, as these press releases from this month, actually, illustrate far too well. It also happens in the UK. London is a hub. Last year, more than 200 criminal charges related to human trafficking were laid down by London police officers. The feeling of frustration or even anger I get when I hear about fundamental human rights violations often quickly turns into a feeling of helplessness. It is very easy to start thinking things like, I am just one young individual. I do not have a big political network. I certainly don't got the cash flow of Bill Gates. In fact, I don't even manage to assemble a wardrobe from IKEA properly. So what on earth can I do? I'm lucky enough to have been a part of an international student committee a couple of years ago. And what I've learned is that me and you and all of us can contribute and make great differences in other people's life. To do so, it's crucial that you are conscious about the great possibilities that you possess. Because your voice and expression can be a strong power when it is combined with today's digital technology. Let me give you a personal story to illustrate. To me, it started in 2015 when I heard that the police in Myanmar, the former Burma, had imprisoned dozens of students. Their crime was having participated in what was mostly peaceful demonstrations. The students were demonstrating against a national education bill, which they claim restricted academic freedom. The All Burma Federation of Student Unions, an umbrella organization in Myanmar, criticized the law for putting all the universities under the Ministry of Education in Myanmar and thereby questioning the independence of the universities. The law was also criticized for forbidding the right to form student unions and for limiting the ethnic languages in which education would be available, something which is very problematic in an ethnically diverse country such as Myanmar. I was a student leader myself at the time, and I realized that in that capacity, I had been doing the exactly same thing as the students in Myanmar did, participating in peaceful demonstrations. The difference was that I was not faced with police violence or a risk of being sentenced to years of imprisonment. So the charges against the students were unjust and they were disproportional. I remember I was especially impressed by and concerned about the General Secretary of the Student Union in Myanmar, Phu Phuang, because she had played a key role in organizing the demonstrations, and now she faced a risk of being sentenced to 9 years of imprisonment. She was 27 at the time. I therefore signed up when the human rights organization I belonged to, Amnesty International, called for students to lead a student campaign in solidarity with the imprisoned students in Myanmar. We did not have any digital tools other than what we all have access to in our everyday life. Email, Skype, Facebook, Microsoft Paint, I don't know, the usual. But very ambitiously, me and a few other students who formed this group, we sent invitations to student politicians and student members of non-profit organizations across the globe and invited them to join us in this principled fight for the right of free speech. We encouraged them to send us their contributions in the form of solidarity videos or solidarity photos, or to arrange local protests in their respective countries, or to collect signatures through petitions, and so on. We also made and handed out very simple posters which read, "We demand the immediate and unconditional release of the Myanmar peaceful students." My Norwegian local student group was located in Bergen, and just for the sake of curiosity, how many of you have ever been in Bergen? Okay, it's actually quite a few, but I think for the majority of you who haven't, Bergen is a city of many qualities. Good weather is not one of them. And as you can see from the photos, the days we carried out our demonstrations were no exception. And just as a quick side note, the fact that all the students in my local student group voluntarily showed up and enthusiastically carried out the demonstrations, despite the bad weather, illustrate a great aspect of voluntary work. At least in my experience, it is a unique opportunity to meet truly dedicated and inspiring people. We invited politicians and artists and a local choir to perform or to speak at our event. And to my surprise, they were actually very keen to contribute. They wanted to protect and to promote the right of free speech through our case. But this was just one event. Different events were carried out by other student groups in other places. But then, the ball started rolling. It turned out that our call for action had inspired students in quite a few other countries. So basically, these students had decided that they wanted to use their right of free speech in unity with the rest of us to enhance the pressure from the international community for the unconditional release of the imprisoned students. In the UK, for example, politicians wrote solidarity messages. Free few, and student activists protesting is not a crime. When I was a student, I campaigned for my fellow students. Free few. When I was a student, I campaigned for peace in Northern Ireland. Japan, I support Myanmar students. Thailand, Myanmar, release all prisoners of conscience. Denmark, Switzerland, #we are the key. Germany, release Myanmar students. France, Iceland, India, Australia, Norway, Algeria, Ukraine, Philippines, Hong Kong. This is a list of the names of the students that were currently imprisoned. We received contributions, hundreds of photos from several corners of the world. The global response was overwhelming, and it far exceeded my expectations. But this was a process that took a while, and in the meantime, there had been a political election in Myanmar. And in March 2016, the National League for Democracy, they took office in March 2016. And I'm sure many of you will be familiar with its Nobel Peace Prize winning leader, Aung San Suu Kyi. So our hopes were high that this new government would be willing to listen. And then, in April 2016, the charges against dozens of students, including the student leader Phyu Phuong, were dropped, and the students were unconditionally released. And finally got their freedom. Following the release, the General Secretary of the Student Union, Phyu Phuong, and her husband were invited to Norway. I was very excited to meet her. After all, she is probably the most hardcore student activist I will ever meet. So when I and the other students who had been working with the case in Norway finally got to meet her, it was like meeting a very special friend. We had been standing on multiple demonstrations and telling her story, so we felt like we kind of knew her already. And of course, it was very rewarding to see her, together with us, enjoying her freedom when we knew that she had spent the last year in a prison. For the sake of completeness, I just talked to her last week on Facebook to ask her permission to share her story here today with all of you. And she still lives in Myanmar. She has now become a mother, and she is working at an institute where nation building is in focus. To be fair, the great outcome of this case cannot only be attributed to our student-led campaign. Major players were involved, such as the US Department of State, human rights organizations, and many local great activists in Myanmar. My aim of telling this story has been to illustrate the impact it can have when just a few students decide to take action. The more general point is that if you are brave enough, and if you are willing to use your freedom of speech, then your opinions, or your demands in our case, will reach out to the public and to the media, to the politicians, and to other influential actors. And if the timing is right, and they join forces, then the community can generate a pressure which the targeted government cannot afford to ignore, or even influence the norms and the perception of an entire society. A great example is the influence which the survivors of the recent school shooting in Florida are having on the direction of the weapon policy in the US. It illustrates that people with integrity and credibility can be a strong power to achieve social change. Sometimes I, and probably some of you as well, may think that there is no way, really, that my actions can possibly make a difference. But what this story tells us is that actually they can. So if you desire a change, take action. And of course, you don't have to be a member of any organization to do that. We all have the digital tools we need. But I will still strongly encourage you, in particular if you are a student, to consider getting involved with voluntary work in an organization you fancy. It is a great way of acquiring skills that may well be relevant for your working life, while you are making new, inspiring friends, presumably, and hopefully having tremendous amounts of fun. But first and foremost, it's an opportunity to become part of something bigger than yourself, and which gives meaning on a very deep level. So never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. Not everyone in the world can be saved, but for those who can, it means the world. Thank you.